Hey, Coach, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, man. It's good to be here.
Dude, so tell everybody where you're at and what you're doing.
So I am most recently at University of North Carolina down in Chapel Hill, coaching football. Just got here. I was spent the last 2 years out at the University of Nebraska, and Coach Brown called me up, asked me if I'd be interested in coming down to Chapel Hill. And I have family down in Myrtle Beach. And, having recently gone through little bit of health struggles, I thought that the warm weather would probably be better for my recovery. So I
There
took a
you
job
go.
this January down in Chapel Hill, and it's been awesome.
You know what, dude, and we'll get into that because I do want to hear the story of the health of your kind of the journey you've been through there. But tell
Mm-hmm.
me the connection with Coach Brown.
So let's see here, 2, 4, 6. We obviously think in seasons as a coach. About 6 years ago, I was coaching outside backers and special teams at West Point. So I'd spent a couple of seasons at West Point, and during that time frame, Coach Brown was working for ESPN. So every now and again, he would do some of our games, and then when we would do our games, he would come up and visit with our staff and just talk about staff structure, program development. He'd watch us practice. We'd ask him for his thoughts on things, and he would give us feedback and different things like that. So got to know him real briefly, not really well during that time frame. But one of the people that he hired right straight away as his defensive coordinator was Jay Bateman, who was the defensive coordinator at West Point for a while. And Jay and I had worked very closely together at West Point, and had asked me to join him down here. So that's kind of how the connection happened between me and Coach Brown.
You know, it's hard not to not like Coach Mac Brown in it.
Yeah, he's just such a good person. Like there's a genuine quality about him that's just to say that he's a true Southern gentleman would probably be an understatement. He's just classic. You love to be around him. He kind of never has to raise his voice at you because you just don't want to let him down. You know what I mean? He's always got your best interest at heart, and so that's a really cool feeling to have.
You know, and for being at University of Texas for so many years and have such success in the way that he did, it's like just the respect and what you have to have for him, knowing the track record that he has got to be pretty amazing just to be under his tutelage, right?
Yeah, well, I think that he is the only active coach that's currently in the College Football Hall of Fame. So that in and of itself kind of speaks to it.
That is so cool. Yeah, I don't even know that I realized it. I was trying to think. So I'm a Baylor University alumni, so I kind of had my issues with
Well,
with you. Even though my wife went to University of Texas, so
there you go. So
hey,
there's some good to you.
there's some good that comes out of University of Texas, I guess. Yeah, yeah. But so tell us the history, like how you began coaching. Was it in high school, and then kind of walk us through how you got to
Oh,
where you are now.
I was reminded not too long ago that I've been coaching for like 20 years now. Um, so it's I started out, I didn't know I was going to be a college football coach. I did not have any aspirations to do that. I went to school with a physics and mathematics degree. That's what I got out of school. So I was going to go work for NASA. I was going to do some of those things. And then had an opportunity to bounce around and try out for different teams all over the place, and ended up getting hurt and then come back. My alma mater called me and said, "Hey, if you come back to school to finish, we'll pay for it, but you got to coach." So I said, "Okay, I'll do that." So I did that for a little bit and got done and moved out to California for a little while as a mortgage broker with one of my older brothers living in Santa Ana, California. A lot of fun, made pretty decent cash at the time, but didn't really feel like I didn't enjoy the job. It was a job. So I actually quit my job, not having any clue what I was going to do. And then within 48 hours, I got a phone call from my head coach at the time in college saying, "Hey, if you come back, we'll pay for you to go to grad school." Perfect. When can I start? And he goes, "When can you get here?" I said, "Buy me a ticket." So he bought me a ticket and I flew back, not having any idea where I was going to stay or anything. Just figured it out on the fly. So I went back to my alma mater, Northern Michigan, as a graduate assistant. Then took a full-time job 2 years later at Fort Scott Community College. I don't know if you've ever heard of Fort Scott, but I had gotten married, and then like 3 days later, took my bride down to Fort Scott Community College. And as we're pulling into town after a 19-hour drive with the U-Haul and the car in tow and the cat in the cab, and she looks at me, she starts poking me on the side. She's like, "Look at that." I'm like, "What?" Look. I'm looking, I'm like, I don't see anything. And then sure as the day is long, I'm sitting there and there's this, I'll never forget this. There's this big blue and white F-150 with kind of like the wood paneling down the side. And it's got the bench seat in the front. You know what I'm talking? You can picture this, right?
Oh yeah.
So then there's two people sitting in the seats. And the best way to describe them is like Grandma and Grandpa Moses sitting in the bench seat, right? And in between them is a goat. A goat sitting in the seat with them. And she looked at me and she goes, you have one season here and that's it.
Was
So
that Kansas? Where was that?
Oh yeah, Fort Scott, Kansas, about
Okay.
straight down Highway 69, about 90 miles south of Kansas City, about 20 miles north of Pittsburgh, Kansas. We used to drive to the big booming town of Joplin, Missouri to go have a fun time on the weekend. So after that season, I ended up going to Fairmont State, West Virginia, another booming metropolis. And then after we had about the same occurrence there, and then I went back to my alma mater, called me and asked me to come back to be a defensive coordinator. I did that for 2 seasons, then went to St. Norbert College in Green Bay, Wisconsin. I was there for 3 years. Then I became the defensive coordinator at Northern Iowa for 3 seasons. Then I became the defensive coordinator at Florida Atlantic University, then went to West Point, then went to UCF, then Nebraska, and now North Carolina. So it's kind of been all over the map a little bit. East of the Mississippi is pretty much, I've known that area pretty well. So it's been a fun experience, man. You learn so much every different stop you make, every place you go. You meet so many different cool people. I wouldn't trade any of it for the world right now.
You know what, too, brother? It's every coach I talk to, and we've been blessed to talk to some really cool, just college coaches. And I love college coaches. They're just so down to earth and honest and real and raw. And there's a humility, right? Because you came up through the ranks and you paid your dues in a big way early on, right?
Yeah. I mean, I would say the first 12 to 14 years of my career, I lost money. Oh, for sure. Yeah. At least the first 12 to 13 years, I lost money coaching football. And my wife, and it was every year. It wasn't because we didn't love what we were doing, but so I was in Green Bay one time. I was coaching at St. Norbert College. We weren't making very much. My wife was working 2 jobs, and she was actually working at the daycare that my kids were at, the YWCA in downtown Green Bay. So they got reduced daycare, right? So she could work there. So I had an opportunity. One of my former coaches was then working for Merrill Lynch. So he called me up. He said, hey, I know it's not great right now for you, but I wanted to see if you want to potentially come over and work for Merrill Lynch. You'll start out, and like my starting salary would have doubled in the first month. easily doubled in the first month. And in that business, in the investment world, I would have had somebody that knows me, that cares about me, that would have taken care of me, which is really rare in that world. So the VP calls me and wants me to do it. And I was like, wow, maybe I should go do this. Maybe I should really. And I had been, working 90 plus hours a week for next to nothing. And so I got up that morning went to the YMCA and got on the treadmill and just ran until I was completely devoid of any functioning thought and probably lack of oxygen to my brain. I got out in my car and I said, you know what? I remember this. I was sitting in my truck and I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and go to Merrill Lynch. And I am not exaggerating when I say not 5 seconds after I made that decision, my phone rang. I was like, hello? I usually don't even answer it when I don't recognize the number. And it was the director of operations for the Green Bay Packers. And they called me and they said, hey, we've been talking to a couple of people and want to know if you want to come in and intern for us this summer, work with us and coach linebackers and do some stuff. And I'm like, absolutely, when you need me.
Yeah. Didn't take much thinking to do that, right?
So I grew up in Wisconsin, and getting the chance to intern for the Green Bay Packers when you live in Green Bay, kind of a big deal. So I was able to coach for the Packers for a summer and work and still continue to do my job at St. Norbert College. So required quite a few more hours, but it was so worth it. It was so worth it.
Now, was that when Favre and that whole crew was there?
Last year. It was his last year. So I used to sit next to Brett at the in the team meetings. Actually, he'd sit in the back and fart and make jokes, do all the things that he does because he's really just a big kid that plays football.
That's funny.
Yeah,
And for that organization, wow,
yeah.
that's Lambeau
Doesn't get
Field, and yeah.
doesn't get any cooler. Really doesn't.
Well, being a Cowboys fan, I'd say there may be a little bit of a
I
debate
mean,
there.
if you like to go to a stadium and watch football on a TV instead of the actual game, I suppose that's true. Because nobody watches the field at the Cowboy Stadium.
I
They all
know.
watch the
No,
TV.
you're right. You know what? And I just I had to give a little dig somehow.
Sure, absolutely.
I'm in God's country right here,
Yeah.
So anyway,
My
dude.
best friend growing up is a Cowboys fan, and I got him tickets to a Packer game, and he wore a Cowboys jersey.
Oh,
Oh, Lord have mercy.
that sounds like a bad Seinfeld episode where
Absolutely.
Elaine wears the Baltimore Orioles cap at like the Yankees game and gets kicked out
Yes,
or whatever.
absolutely.
That's funny. So tell me a little bit about, did you have siblings growing up?
I did. So I have a blended family growing up. Between my mom and dad, there's two of us, myself and my younger sister. And then my mother from a previous marriage, I have a brother and a sister. And then my father from a previous marriage, I have two brothers. So there's six of us. It's really kind of an interesting dynamic because I come from a mixed family. So back in the late 70s when I was born, being half black and half white was not very common like it is now. Now it's just normal.
Right.
But in the 70s and 80s, that was not the case. So I have two brothers. You can't mistake them for not being black. And then I have a brother and a sister who are lily white. So for me, that was just absolutely normal. And I didn't know anything else. So I didn't even notice it. And so growing up, and my one brother Ryan, we'd be hanging out all the time. We'd go fishing or skateboarding or play football and hanging out. And everybody was like, who's that? I'm like, that's my brother. Well, no, who is that? That's my brother Ryan. And I couldn't understand how people didn't believe me. I'm like, no, that's my brother. They just didn't get it. So it's cool that that's not the case nowadays, but I definitely distinctly remember that.
Yeah, that is cool, man. Are any of them in the coaching space?
Yeah, absolutely. So my one brother, Derek, was actually the National High School Coach of the Year a number of years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, he was the head coach at not Chillicothe, Waverly, Ohio, down in southeast Ohio. And a number of years ago, if you'll remember the story, there was a kid, I don't remember if it was Down syndrome or Fragile X, I think, who got an opportunity to score during a football game. That was my brother. So it was Jake was the kid's name. So it was really cool to see that. So yeah, he's now currently living out in Riverside, California, coaching high school football out there.
Dude, I think I continue to see that replay of that video, like on
Yeah.
Facebook or somewhere on social media. It
Oh, yeah.
pops up every once in a while. What a great memory. What a great thing, obviously.
Yeah, I say this all the time to people. I'm like, I like to consider myself a good person, but I know Derek's a lot better person than I am. He's just a good guy. And hopefully one day I'll be as good a person as he is, but he's just a really, really good person.
That's cool. So growing up in a blended family, you probably did you have your biological dad and your stepdad?
No, I had my biological dad and mom all at the same time. Yeah.
How did your dad influence you as a young man?
So my dad was actually early on in his life, he was a pretty bad alcoholic early on growing up. And everybody in his family was, and all of his brothers were, and his grandfather. And so there's literally in my family, there's only 2 or 3 of us males on both sides, my mom's side and my side, my dad's side, that don't have some form of addiction. There's only 2 of us, and like go back for 3 or 4 generations. It's crazy. So I've always known that I was genetically predisposed to it. But my dad growing up had beaten it and became an alcoholic counselor for the VA. So that was really, really cool for me to see. And my dad influenced me so much on so many levels. Just, to learn that you're not always perfect, but you can overcome so many things with just by hard work and being honest. He's made mistakes. We've made mistakes. And he's like, as long as you own your mistakes and try to get past them, then there's nothing to be ashamed of being who you are. And, my dad was my Pop Warner football coach, and he was hard on me. I mean, like he was tough on me, which early on, truthfully, probably created a little bit of a rift for us because I didn't understand. I didn't have perspective enough to understand of what he was trying to do. But as I got older, I realized how fortunate I was that he didn't just go easy on me, and that he made it hard. He made it hard on purpose. So I became a better person and player because of the way he handled me when I was younger.
Dude, and that's, I think so many dads, there's that struggle too of the sense of being hard on your kid, but especially from a dad's perspective for sons, because I've heard it said, many dads, I didn't want to tell my son I loved him because I didn't want to make him soft. There's this idea that
My
for some
dad was,
reason,
my dad, I would tell you, was never afraid to say he loved me in any way, shape, or form. It was public displays of affection between us all the time. So for me, and I always wondered, do other people think that's weird? Because in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, you didn't do that stuff. And I think my dad was ahead of the time, was ahead of the curve. I think because he grew up without his dad, and he knew what that struggle was like. And he wasn't around two of my brothers when they were growing up. He wanted to make sure that I knew that he always had my back and that he was always there for me. So he kind of was the other way. There was always he was going to be at all my sporting events. He was going to be there, and I was going to know that he was there. Now, he
dude,
was going to tell me if I messed up, but I was going to know it.
what a legacy though, for you to see him overcome this incredible thing, addiction.
Yeah.
And then for him to be that kind of dad that pushes you so hard because he wants the very best out of you and wants you to understand life isn't easy. Life isn't fair, right?
Yeah.
But yes, to tell you, dude, you're a blessed dude because not a lot of guys can say that.
What's really cool is having learned more and more about the history of my dad growing up. He grew up in Conway, South Carolina in the 1940s, which was as segregated, as unfair as you can possibly get in the country. And then for him to turn around, and he harbors no ill will. Like he grew up in not being able to vote in segregated schools, and literally was a tobacco sharecropper. That's how he grew up. He had no electricity, lived on a dirt floor. To see him overcome so many obstacles that were constantly put in his way, kind of, for me, I'm always have a can-do attitude. Like, we can just get stuff done. Let's just go do it. Because if he can do that, then why can't I? And so for me, I count myself as extremely blessed to have my father still involved in my life. And, I'm able to see some of the things. He doesn't talk about it much, really. If I ask him, he will. But it's stories that I hear from other folks that he grew up with, that they just walk up to me and say, like, you got to hear this one about your dad. You got to know that your dad did this. And that's the cool part, because he's got a lot that he could probably brag about, and he just doesn't want to. He lets, it is what it is to him, but other people certainly brag on him quite a bit. So that's a really cool feeling for me.
Well, and the humility in that too, right?
Yeah.
The humbleness of who he is. And yeah, there's so much to that. How did he teach you, or what did he teach you about being a husband?
He taught me that about being a husband. There's a few things he taught me, because and I'll tell you that it's not always pretty, right? Especially when someone's overcome all this addiction around their life and his own addictions and things like that. So I would say that, and my parents would agree, that it probably wasn't the prettiest environment for me to be around early on, for sure. But what he taught me as he overcame his struggles and the relationship between him and my mom, one of the things that my wife and I agree on, because of my dad, was that we will always have open lines of communication. So whether what I have to say is going to hurt her feelings or not, I can't just count on the fact that she's just going to know. And she does the same for me. So for us, he taught me how to make sure that there's the old axiom of never go to bed angry. We kind of turn that into a little bit of never go to bed with things being unsaid. And that's one thing I learned from my dad. That was a big thing for me, to make sure that we had an open line of communication, that we talk things through. And sometimes we're not always going to agree, and that's okay. But at least we always know where we're at.
You know what, dude? And just, that's a huge, just such a priceless piece in itself, because seems in the couples that I talk to, the men, the women, whatever, it's communication's always one of the number one issues, right? It's
Yeah, I've had so many friends, and a lot of times, a lot of coaches they get divorced because you're away so much. I mean, you work 90 to 100 hours a week, and it's nonstop, and you're always on the phone. When you're home, you're always on the phone, and so just learning how to communicate. I mean, people have most of the problems in the world just come from not being able to properly communicate with each other. How many problems would just be alleviated if we all just sat down and just talked plainly? You know.
yeah. Hey, preach, bro. Because
I don't want
I
to
think
oversimplify it, but that's really what it is.
no, you're right. It is. It is as simple as that. And here's the thing too. Marriage, as we all know, is not easy. For any young people out there that think it is,
No,
believe in, the fairy
sometimes
tale
it's not
thing.
pretty.
No, it gets ugly at times, and especially early on.
Oh,
Just trying to work through all the differences, and then when you start having kids, then it becomes a
oh,
whole nother deal, right?
oh God, yeah, yeah. I got three of them, so yes, it becomes little kids, little problems, big kids, big problems.
How old are your kiddos?
My oldest is 16, going on 35. That's Maya. My middle one is Jovan Jr. He's 13, and then my smallest one, she's 4. So she sounds like she just came inside, actually scraped her knee up or something.
Two boys and a girl?
2 girls and a boy.
Two girls and a boy. So the oldest one's a girl.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Okay. Um, what's been your biggest struggle as a dad, and how did you overcome it?
My biggest struggle as a dad has probably been in time management and making sure that I allocate the time they deserve. Because I spend so much of my time trying to make sure that I'm providing for them that I would spend all day and all night in the office. And I would, and I do it for them. I don't coach football for me. I coach football for a million other reasons, myself the least of which. But one of the things you want to make sure as you're in this pressure cooker that we do is that you're taking care of your family and you're providing for them. And then I ran across one of my old ball coaches, and we were talking about, being in the office and doing that. And he looks at me and he goes, "Hey, it's not quality of time your kids care about. They care about quantity of time. They want to know you're present." And so I learned that there are just times you got to walk away from work or whatever is bothering you and go be present with your kids and be present in the moment, whether it's driving by to see a track meet or just be in the moment for them. Let them know that you're there. And I think that's hard sometimes to manage career, wife, kids, providing, making sure, in my world, your job may change every 6 months. So you're always looking ahead and staying where you are, but you got to make sure that you're taking care of your family first and foremost. So my hardest part as being a dad was, I've never had an issue really expressing how much I care for them, but making sure that they understood that I was still trying to be in the moment when I was gone and on the road. So FaceTiming more, and thank God I missed my daughter's first day of kindergarten. My oldest, she thanked the Lord, I was able to figure out, and this was way back in the day, like MSN Messenger, that I set up a video camera in my office. I was sleeping on this is funny. I took a job at Northern Iowa from Green Bay, Wisconsin. I had no place to live, so I was actually sleeping on my cubicle floor on a yoga mat for 6 months or so. And so I woke up early because she was starting kindergarten one day, and I hooked up this jalopy of a camera to my computer on what I swear was dial-up internet access. I know it was at home. And she paraded around in her kindergarten day dress and twirled around and wanted me to tell her that she was pretty. And I have never felt like a bigger heel in all my life than when I wasn't able to be there for her first day of kindergarten. So whatever happened after that, I would literally drive about 7 hours between the two. I would drive home whenever there was a 24-hour break, and I would stay at home, and they would all the kids would crawl into bed with me. I had 2 at the time. They'd crawl into bed with me, and we'd hang out until whenever they fell asleep. And then I would get up at 1 or 2 in the morning and then drive back to Iowa to make sure that I got there for the 8 or 9 o'clock staff meeting, because I wanted those kids to know that Daddy was going to be there more than he was.
Dude, is it not? I mean, just those memories in themselves are such great reminders for so many.
Oh,
And you said it, it's about being intentional in the time that we are with our kids. I mean, with the cell phones now, everything else, we get so distracted so easily and so often that it's, not long ago, I remember it's been probably 4 or 5 years ago, we were all in the kitchen and we're sitting around talking, standing around talking, and I'm on my phone, and one of my daughters starts talking, and next thing I know, my wife's like, honey, and I'm on my phone and I look up and she's talking to me. I didn't realize it. And it's like,
yeah.
oh, crud. you know, so it's like,
Yeah.
luckily I have a wife who keeps me pretty engaged and keeps me, pulls me out of the office sometimes going, hey, you better come in here and do some family time or whatever. So I
Absolutely.
get it, dude, the struggle. And I think it's the same for every man. It's trying to find that balance of providing, but yet
Yeah.
being there emotionally too, and physically at times when you're there.
And I've been fortunate in the people that I've worked with and for that they want your kids around. So for me, I have a really unique job in that I tell kids when I recruit them, and I tell their mothers when I recruit them, I want you to be around my kids all the time. So I want you to come over, hang out at the, we always intentionally buy a house that's within 15 minutes of campus so the players can come visit. And then they ask me why. And I say, well, I think it's important that you see that, because most of the players that I have don't have a dad at home. They just don't, they don't have that structure. So I think it's important for my players to see me as a father. I think it's important for my son to see a young college athlete and how they're supposed to act, right? And how they act respectful and they say yes, sir, and no, ma'am. And then I think it's important for my daughters to see how young men are supposed to talk to women, because my players are going to say yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am to my wife and my daughter, and they're going to be of the utmost respect. And so when my daughters see that, that's just now the expectation. That's not, oh, this would be cool if he said that. No, that's the expectation. So I think it works as much as um, I think my players get out of seeing me be a dad around my kids, and my son rides the bus with us to games and he's out there on the field pregame, and my players love that. I get as much from them as they get from me. So it's really kind of a symbiotic relationship between the two. And it's really kind of cool and unique to see. And my job is unique in the such that I'm able to do those things.
The influence you have, dude, in that is just amazing. And I love the fact that you are conscious of that and that you're
Oh
purposeful
yeah.
in that, because that says so much, because you're right. So many of us who grew up without a dad weren't around a family and didn't know what it was supposed to look like. So then when we
Right.
had families, we were like, oh, what the heck am I doing? But for you to
Yeah.
model that, wow, brother, that's amazing.
Yeah. It's pretty cool. And again, I get as much out of it as anybody. So for me, and it's cool to see your son hang out with some of your players. Like that's cool. I think, my I got pictures of Junior learning how to catch punts from Mike Hughes, who was a first round draft pick for the Minnesota Vikings. I've got Junior, he considers one of his big brothers to be Shaquem Griffin. There's the outside linebacker from UCF that got drafted by the Seattle Seahawks with the big story because he's got one hand and all that. He calls those guys like his big brothers. So that's as much as hopefully I model for my players, they're doing the same thing for my family. So that's really, it's really fun.
That's awesome. So let's dive into the struggle, the cancer
Mm-hmm.
struggle. Tell me that story.
Okay. So I was on the road actually recruiting a year ago. It's just been over a year. So it was December of 2018. I was on the road recruiting with one of my coaching friends, Eric Shander, the D coordinator here at Nebraska. And our flight actually got delayed. There was a huge snowstorm back in Omaha, and we were in Dallas, as a matter of fact, and we couldn't get out of Dallas, so we stayed at the airport right by the Dallas airport. And we're sitting down, and he's looking at my neck, and all of a sudden there's like this huge lump on my neck that wasn't there previously. And I'd gone to the doctor a couple of times. They thought it was like some kind of a salivary infection. They gave me antibiotics that weren't working. And he looks at me and he goes, brother, you better go to the doctor now. So I had a huge goiter looking thing hanging out of my neck. So I flew back the next day. Team doctor came in to see me, and I explained to him, hey, this isn't working. The antibiotics you've given me haven't worked. So he called in a favor And a specialist came in off of work and met me in the ER in Omaha or Nebraska in Lincoln. And I told him all the symptoms, and he's looking around and looking down my throat. And I said, look, I don't want, at this point, I'm starting to recognize that maybe something's going on here. So I look at him. I say, I don't want any sugarcoating. I don't want you to tell me. Just tell me the God's honest truth, what's going on here. And he's like, preliminarily, looks like you've got like stage 4 lymphoma and you might not make it very long. And I was like, oh, that's a little too real.
Yeah.
Like gone in 6 months, gone.
Wow.
Yeah. So then I went in and got a bunch of imaging done. They took a biopsy. It ended up that I was like really stage 3 throat cancer that had spread, metastasized in a couple of lymph nodes. I can't remember the huge technical. It's got some long 80-syllable word for it. And I had 2 of my lymph nodes and a tumor on my tongue were all 3 cancerous. So then I went through the shock and all of dealing with that. Called the staff right away, called my wife, and then braced myself to call my mom and my dad, which was the hardest conversation, telling my kids and that. Because at that point, people that have seen the earth go around the sun a couple of times, let's say that, those guys that we knew back in the day when you got diagnosed with cancer, it was a death sentence. It wasn't, hey, you're going to be okay. No, we all knew what that meant. And so that was kind of hard to shake a little bit initially. It's very surreal to get diagnosed with something like that. It puts a lot of things in a new perspective and a new light. And so came home, said, when are we starting treatment? Let's go. Because that's just what we do. We go right back to work. It's funny. I'm sitting in with my radiation oncologist. That's the guy that runs the radiation therapy that hits you. And he's like, well, we can start treatment on February 8th. Doc, it's like January 15th. Why are we not starting tomorrow? And my wife said I almost got up out of the chair and gave the guy a heart attack because I was so perturbed that we were not starting like immediately. He's like, no, you want to make sure you, I said, okay, I get it. I'll start, eating clean and getting myself ready for it. He's like, you're going to lose a lot of weight, which sounds like it might not be all that bad a deal, but it got extreme. So then I started immediately at the same time. I did both chemo and radiation at the same time. So I was scheduled for 4 rounds of chemo and 38 rounds of radiation. And I ended up going through 3 rounds of chemo and 38 rounds of radiation. So my chemo got cut short by 1 round, thank the maker. And I kept on trying to work during that time to give myself a sense of normalcy. But eventually it got to the point where I couldn't walk anymore because I'd gotten so deteriorated with so many things. And there's a day that I'll never forget. The worst that I had felt, arguably the worst I felt. I had 3 times where I really didn't know if I was going to make it. Over the course of my treatment, I had lost 102 pounds. I didn't eat for well over 2 months. I had feeding tubes put in. They were giving me sugar water, straight to the port in my heart, and all of those deals were going on. So I couldn't eat, and my throat was blistered, and I looked like I just got out of Auschwitz. It was awful. Well, one day my father-in-law came down. I was feeling pretty decent. Well, I was in the basement because it was a little bit cooler down in the basement, and it kind of helped with some of the symptoms that I was going through. In the Midwest, we have basements. You guys up there,
that's what I've heard.
Slabs, but in the Midwest, we have basements.
Yeah.
So I was down there hanging out in the man room, in the man cave. And my father-in-law was in town, and he was visiting, checking up on us. And he had made some toast. So I called upstairs, and I'm like, what is that god-awful smell? They're like, nothing. I guess he had maybe burnt a corner of the toast. Well, the smell hit me. And when you're in chemo and radiation, everything's out of whack. So I started to retch for the next 10 hours, nonstop. It's not an exaggeration to say that it was 500 times. That's not an exaggeration.
Weird.
So during that time, I lacerated everything in my stomach and my throat. So I have a bunch of internal bleeding going on, which doesn't help. So now you're dry heaving for another couple hours. And my wife came downstairs, and the day before, I had talked to my son and my daughter. I'm like, how are you guys doing? You guys okay with all this? So I started to look pretty bad. And they're like, yeah, we're fine. What do you mean? And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, I have raised some of the most cold-hearted kids that have ever walked the face of the earth. Like, sweet Jesus, they have no empathy for anything.
Yeah, no big deal, Dad. We're moving on.
Yeah, whatever. Good luck. And then I grabbed my son a little bit later, and this is before I started the whole 8 hours or 10 hours of straight retching. And I said, are you sure you're okay with everything? And he looked at me as stone cold in the face as he could, and he said, yeah, you're my dad. You're the toughest guy I know. You're going to be fine. And so that hit me that very next day when I was on the couch and it had been 8 hours of straight retching, 8 straight hours. I couldn't stand up. I couldn't walk. I mean, it took me 25 minutes to climb 18 stairs. And I had this milk jug that I had turned into a bucket that I could throw up into. I mean, it was filled with, as gross as it sounded, I mean to be too graphic, but it was filled with blood. And I'm going up the stairs. And I just remember I said a prayer, the most earnest prayer I've ever said in my life. And I remember as I was crawling over to the stairs, I said, God, I am not giving up, but you might win this round. You might get me today, but I'm not going to give up. And because my son told me the day before that I was the toughest guy that he knew, I had enough strength to climb one more stair, and then climb one more stair, and then one more stair, until eventually I got to the main floor of the house. And it was either call an ambulance or try and crawl out to the car. And I decided to crawl out to the car. It took me a while, but I got there. And then they put me in the infusion room, and, they were talking about giving me a transfusion, and they brought in, I knew it was really, really bad when they brought in the palliative care doctors, because those are the guys that are there to help manage end of life stuff. And that's when I was like, oh, I'm in trouble. But because of the thing that my son said to me the night before, I didn't feel like I had a choice but to be okay. And so my son saved my life. True story. That's a true story.
Dude, that is crazy. And, I can only imagine through the struggle too, the testing of your faith, but also yet seeing what God can do through all of that. And the people you probably don't even know have been impacted by your remarkable story of faith and perseverance and endurance and everything, right?
Yeah. I would say that I would tell you that I'm not the most overtly religious person there is. I mean, I have my faith, and I believe in the Almighty. The thing that I started out with, and I think what changed for me, was my perspective on a lot of deals. So, the first week you get diagnosed with cancer, even though you feel pretty good physically, you don't know like there's anything wrong. Emotionally and mentally, you are a complete wreck. I don't care how strong a front you put on, you are a wreck. Whether you want to admit it or not, you're a wreck. And so I remember sitting in the shower, and I was like, good, what am I? Because the first 3 thoughts I had that run through my mind when I got diagnosed with cancer was, who's going to give away my daughter at her wedding, my oldest? Who's going to teach my son how to shave? And my youngest daughter at the time was 3. I'm like, she's not even going to know who I am. She's not going to be able to remember me. She's only 3. She's not going to know me. So those are the 3 thoughts that ran through my head. And I'm sitting in the shower, and I'm upset. I'm sure I'm bawling my eyes out. It's the only time I probably cried during the whole deal. And I remember thinking to myself, wait a minute. Thank God it's you that has it, not them.
Wow.
And so I looked at it from the perspective of, the Lord decided it was time for me to get it so I could stop, hopefully not have to have them get it.
Dude,
so
I
once
love
I
the
had that
perspective.
once I had that perspective, I felt like I was going to be fine.
What's interesting, there was a story when we first got married, and this doesn't compare to your story, but just putting it in perspective, I guess, my wife, we had a miscarriage, and we had tried for a long time to have kids and didn't have any at the time. And a friend of mine shared, I was real angry. I was pissed off at God everything because we had a
Mhm.
miscarriage and the difficulty of what that entails and everything. And he told me a story one time. He said, John, he says, I got a neighbor whose husband, they're old, and the husband passed away. And I walked across the street just to see how she was doing. And I said, hey, how you doing? She's like, I'm doing good. I'm doing good. He's like, how are you doing so good? What's going on here? Your husband just passed away. She said, you know what? It's in the way you look at things. It just because we're good people or we're Christians or God believing, God fearing people, whatever, that doesn't mean bad things shouldn't happen to us or can't
Yeah.
happen to us. And it's just like, wow, that just for some reason gave me clarity in
Right.
this sense of what wasn't sensible at the
Right. Yeah. I mean,
time.
because
Right?
I'm telling you, you get diagnosed with something like that, you have a miscarriage, or you get diagnosed with cancer, nothing makes any sense anymore. Nothing does.
Well, and just the why, dude, that's what gets
Yeah.
me because I struggle with the why with just the little things that happen.
Sure.
So with cancer, it's like, why me? Why,
Yeah.
you're going down that path, and before you know it, you're like depressed and and you're just in a whole
Yeah.
nother world.
Yeah. Everything gets changed. And even some of the things you can't control. I mean, when you go through radiation and chemo, it actually changes your body chemistry. So your brain works differently. So there were days, in the first couple of weeks, it screws up like I guess the appropriate word is like circadian rhythm, where you sleep and you wake up. I'm an early riser. I'm a 4:35 a.m. wake up guy. Well, when I started radiation, I was like 2:33 a.m. wake up. So now I'm sitting there wide awake. So I go down to the basement, and they say the best thing you can do is exercise. So I'd hop on the elliptical for an hour. And then I'd watched every single Netflix documentary known to man at least twice. Some I don't even care for, but I watch them again anyway. Because I like to read, and I read, I try to read in the off season. I try to read a book a week. Well, when you're going through chemo and radiation, you have what's called like chemo fog. So you can't, and this was really frustrating for me. Since I like to read so much, you can't focus, right? I would read a page and have no idea what I just read. And I have to read a page like 15 times to get through one page of reading. Well, that's not going to work. So I just started watching Netflix documentaries and was able to pick a whole bunch of stuff up like that. So maybe that helped me learn some things that I wouldn't have ever picked up before. I don't know.
Dude, what I love about you, man, and I could tell you're a lover of life, and now you get it, right? In the
Yeah,
perspective, like you said, it's like whatever comes my way, buddy, I beat this cancer and I've been through it. Nothing's gonna hold me back, right?
that's right. Yeah. I mean, you do, and I've always been one of those, like, I'm fortunate enough, like my mom growing up was always like, hey, make sure you go out and enjoy life as while you can, especially when you're young. Because when you get older, you might not have that opportunity. You might not be able to do some of those things. So I did. I went out and I enjoyed life as a young man. No question I did. I had fun. I went out and I wasn't afraid to hop in a car and drive to New Orleans or go out to California and work or go down to Myrtle Beach and hang. Like, I was good with that. I wanted to, like when I was living in Cali, on one day I woke up in the morning and surfed. Then I went to the mountains and skied. And then I went to Disneyland at night to see the fireworks because I wanted to say I did that all in one day. I wanted to say one day I did all these things, which is cool. I could do that there. So I did it. So you do get a good perspective. And I do love all the different aspects of life, whether it's good or bad sometimes. Sometimes, big obstacles are just opportunities. And that's how I look at life now. And even more so now that was able to go through the last 12 months of difficulties.
Man, as we wrap up, one last question.
Yeah.
What's the best thing about being a dad?
Oh man. It's so fun. It's the most enriching thing I've ever done in my life. I've ever been a part of in my life. Because I don't want to say done, because most of it happens to you. You don't get to do it. Most of it happens to you.
Yeah, truth.
I think it teaches you so much about so many things. Your ability to love grows exponentially. You have what you like, and you love your parents and you love your wife. Being a dad is a completely different kind of animal, in my opinion. So my ability to love has grown exponentially. I have learned patience beyond patience, because at 3 o'clock in the morning, when the little one's got a nightmare and she wants to crawl into bed and you're just exhausted, it's all okay. I've learned perseverance because of my kids. Like I said before, I think my son saved my life. He's probably not even aware of it yet. I'll tell him at some point in time, but he definitely saved my life. They taught me how to persevere when there were days that I didn't know that I could go on because I was in such a bad shape. All I had to do was think of my 3 kids and I would be able to persevere without any problems. Your ability, you become such a better person. You become, truthfully, in all honesty, if you want to know a little bit about what it's like to understand, maybe not understand, it's not the right word, in order to appreciate the Almighty, look into the eyes of a baby kid, your baby, when it's first born. Your whole universe explodes. What you thought you knew, you don't know. What you thought were concrete things in life aren't anymore. You have a whole deeper level of understanding so many more things. And I think that's as close as I've ever been to feeling completely whole. And my kids will tell you right now, if we're watching TV in the living room and they want to change the channel, they just come up and lay on top of me or snuggle next to me. I'm asleep in 5 minutes and they get to watch whatever they want. I mean, that's what they do.
They've learned that that's the key to the
Yeah.
remote control, huh?
Yeah. Just come up and snuggle next to Dad and he'll be asleep because there's the level of comfort you get from being around your family and being around my kids just changes everything for me.
I love it, man. What a powerful story, dude. I love it, love it, love it, man. Keep up the great work. Tell people how they can connect with you. I know social media, you have Twitter.
Yeah. So it's for Twitter, it's at @coach_DeWitt. And that's me. That's probably the best way to be able to get a hold of me and shoot me a message or see what I'm doing. Usually it's mostly just either football recruiting stuff or pictures of my family, to be honest.
Dude,
Probably a whole lot of my kids.
I see a book coming out of this thing, man. What a story. Wow.
It's been pretty enlightening for me, to be honest with you. It really has.
That's cool. Dude, I appreciate you, Coach. I know you're busy and got a lot going on. Thanks for doing this. Thanks for taking the time among all the other stuff you got going on in this crazy pandemic. And I'm sure the way it's changed your world and recruiting and all the other stuff, it's just nuts, huh?
Well, I appreciate you guys having me on and letting me talk to you. And hopefully we've talked about some things that strike a chord with some people. And, it's a crazy time right now. We're all out there social distancing and we're all social creatures. So we like being around each other, but a little bit of distance doesn't hurt, especially for those of us that are immunocompromised a little bit. Stay home.
Yes.
At least a little bit.
Yes. Dude, we'll catch up again soon. I appreciate your time.
Awesome. Thanks so much, man.
Thanks, Coach. See you.